All right, welcome back. The interim budget was read out by the finance minister today. Her shortest speech, of course, it was a comprehensive one. It covered a number of details. Some of them were left untouched. The tax slabs obviously were not touched upon at all because she felt that there is perhaps going to be some tweaking that will happen towards July once the new government comes into play. Dr. Mukesh Aghi, President and Chief Executive Officer of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, is joining us on the program to talk more about this. Dr. Aghi, appreciate you joining us. First up, your initial impressions of this budget. If I was to ask you to rate it out of a scale of 1 to 5, what would you give it? And how has the finance minister also played it very, very safe? You do not want to be making announcements, that will perhaps rock the boat that this particular government has been enjoying, for so long and so well.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. One is it's a very responsible budget. It's a budget which maintains a economic growth momentum. It's a budget which focuses on investment in infrastructure, in healthcare, and also looking at on the logistics supply chain decongestion. So it's a budget which, even the interim, is very balanced, very prudent, and focuses on making sure that beside the growth story, the bottom of the pyramid folks benefit from it.
Were there any expectations that you had personally from this particular budget? Obviously, interim budgets are not the ones that, have wishful thinking attached to it. But at the same time, this is an election year. Do you think there was more that could be done to galvanize this juggernaut of a campaign that the government is about to embark on because it's election year?
Well, we did not expect much from this budget as far as trying to focus on long term. I think it's a very responsible process taken by the finance minister to make sure that you're not able to do a budget which kind of gets the opposition going. I think it's a budget, for example, there's an increment in defense spending. So you will see a lot of capital expenditure. There's an increment in the infrastructure spending. But more important is decongestion of supply chain, especially the logistics. You're able to move goods much more faster because the Indian exports were getting less competitive because of the cost of logistics. I think this focuses on helping those export markets to make sure that the cost of logistics comes down. So I would say that very prudent, very responsible, the budget which has been presented by the finance minister.
Right. And sir, one last question before we let you go. This is obviously a budget which is ambitious. It's a budget which is aspirational. There are landmarks and there are pointers that this government has been going by, and so far they have been able to touch all of those landmarks. The next one is 5 trillion. After that, it's 7 trillion. It's the 5th largest economy already. It aspires to be the 3rd by 2030. In your opinion, are we on the right track considering the changes and the diversity of the changes that the government has been making to get to this particular point?
Well, it's a budget which basically encompasses the population of India, especially the bottom of the pyramid, from healthcare perspective, from welfare perspective. It's a budget which basically focuses on infrastructure, creating the momentum for the economy to keep on moving forward. It's a budget which focuses on newer technology, especially in R&D, trying to provide long-term loans to startups, especially in the innovation sector. So it's a budget which basically fires up the economy from a technology and innovation perspective. And then looking at the defense posture, more capital spending on the defense side. So I think it's a very balanced budget, which basically keeps in mind every segment of the society. And yes, it keeps on building the momentum for this economy to grow from 4 trillion to 5, 7, and basically focus on 2047 when India will become a developed economy. So I think I would give, as per your rating, almost 5 rating to the budget itself.
Right. Dr. Aghi, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much. Dr. Moksha Kalyanram, advocate, Lam & Taj Legal, is also with us. Jayant Krishna, senior fellow at CSIS, is also joining us at this point in time. Mr. Sandeep Chatra, Executive Director of ActionAid India, joins us on the program as well. Dr. Anil Banchor, MD of RDC, also with us on the program. Mr. Vinayak Mehta, founder of Infinity Money, joins us on the program as well. Mithali Nikore, senior economist, with us on the show as well. Dr. Moksha, if I can begin with you and if you can hear me. Dr. Moksha, are you there with us? Okay, perhaps not. Mr. Chacha, I'll come to you. Well, let's also break down what the finance minister has elucidated as, some of the achievements by this government. And some of them obviously border on a number of social projects that this particular government has been very, very, robust about. They've been thumping their chest on the changes that have come about. Of course, be it the toilets, be it women empowerment, be it, the Awas Yojana, and, be it, the eradication of grim poverty to a lot of extent. And, Jai Anusandhan, innovation is the key, is also something that the Prime Minister spoke about. Do you make sense of what has been delivered today, considering the fact that this is election year and too much tweaking perhaps will spoil or wreak havoc on the goodwill that the Bharatiya Janata Party and this particular government has been able to maintain for the past 10 years, besides a few ups and downs, specifically the ones that happened during COVID?
Thank you. Still doing the number crunching, but thank you for getting me here. And let me just begin by saying that within the Gyan framing, the Garib, Yuva, Annadata and Nari framing, which the finance minister at the outset of her presentation had given, that focus, I think it's a welcome focus. Within that focus, if I were to not look at and of course she went at length, to explain the progress over the last 10 years. And that's something that I think it's fully in her speech, welcome progress. But if I were to just look at this year, where I will see welfare programming, social welfare spend, I would only say that the social welfare policies, programs, and budget allocations, we're talking of the budget here, have been extended. So if you take each one of them, the PM Anna Yojana, the Pradhan Mantri PM Kisan Yojana, for instance, the extension of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana in rural India, and a welcome addition of focus on urban and extended focus on urban, MG and REGA. So almost all of the social welfare programs, on the back of which she had also mentioned that in the last years, 25 crore people have been lifted out of multidimensional poverty, and that's the Niti Aayog data. So all of these schemes have been enhanced, or not in terms of quantum of money, because if you compare the revised estimates of 2023, 2024 to the budget allocations or the budget estimates presented, these have only seen either marginal or a very, very limited increase, almost nil increases. Some would even argue that if GDP is going by 7%, and we have growth, then at least on social welfare spending, 7% is the minimal. But needless to say, as you were saying, this is an interim budget. And in an interim budget, you always have this question of what Rohinton Mistry wrote his book on, the fine balance.
Right. So, and Mr. Chacha, the finance minister also went on to say that, the women who are enrolling in the education sector, that percentage has gone up by a whopping 28%. What do you make of these trends?
No, these are positive trends. The other positive trend, and a very significant positive trend, is the female participation in work. The women workers' participation rate, that's gone up. That's gone up over the last 8 years, 8 years by 6%. It's 33%. Similarly, what she also mentioned today was the enrollment of girls in STEM education, the science, technology, engineering, and medicine progression, and that's up to 43%, the highest in the globe. So I think there are progressive trends. And what I would like to argue, although you need to have a fine balance, and that's where what the finance minister seems to have targeted today, bringing down the financial deficit to around 5.1%. But one would also want to argue that in order to unleash the aspirations, unleash the power, unleash the economy, what you would need to do is to spend much more on welfare programming. And I would even go to the extent of a country like ours perhaps needs deficit financing. So that's how I would like to see it, because the more you spend on people, the more you spend on human resources, the more welfare you create, the more hope you create, and the more engines of economy you spur in a decentralized manner. So I think, given that it's an interim budget, this has been the focus has been on sort of looking at a fine balance. There are some welcome additions. There are some welcome new announcements. The announcements on the rooftop solar, the announcements on including Asha, Anganwadi helpers and others
Right, sir.
into Ayushman Bharat scheme, the extension of urban into for slum dwellers, for those living in unauthorized settlements. I hope that comes from the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana urban. So there are those kind of sort of welcome additions. The
And of course,
extension
those free vaccinations for cervical cancer.
True, and the expansion of the Lakpati Mahila program. We have 9 crore women roughly in our country which are enrolled into something like 83 lakh SHG, self-help groups. So we were supporting about 2 crore women earlier, and I think this budget is talking about expanding that to 3 crores. I have to look at the financial outlays of what expansion has happened. But I think there are some of these welcome additions. One of the things that I would like to say is this whole question of what the finance minister said today was achieving a net zero target by 2070, and she announced a set of sort of programs around it. The bio-linked programs to it, the bioenergy programs, solar rooftop programs. There were other programs, e-vehicles, and so on and so forth, e-buses. But I think that's welcome.
Okay, all right, sir. Let me come back to you. In fact, let me take a quick response from Vinayak Mehta on this as well. Vinayak, what did you make of the budget? This is obviously something which notably is also a repetition of what was done in last Feb. But the fact of the matter is that the government cannot help it. There has to be some constraint as to what will be announced in Feb and what will be announced in the next budget, which is obviously going to be after the formation of the new government. But the fact of the matter is that the stock market is jumping and thumping because there are a lot of exciting projects that the capex that she announced today will entail.
First of all, I would like to say and congratulate that it's a very confident and a futuristic budget the government has presented today. Looking at the stock market, looking at the financial economy sector, the interest rate reductions which they are planning across in the banking sector will fuel in a lot of fundings in the banking sector itself. Secondly, the effect on tourism that the government is planning across in terms of that earlier it was make in India, now they are looking forward to have it travel in India. The development what they are looking forward in the infrastructure sector, they are looking forward in terms of building up airports, building up more destinations like Lakshadweep in India itself, that people look forward of spending the money over in travel sector in India itself.
Yeah, and she also mentioned that air connectivity to Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities has improved drastically. There are 517 new routes, and India has already ordered about 1,000 new aircrafts from Boeing as well as Airbus combined.
That's right. There are plans across to put in 139 new airports in the next year. But looking at that, this is an interim budget before the elections coming in. There would be a lot of scope which will be there, and people would be looking forward that what budget is been presented in the July month once the elections are over, and how much it is going to reach to the ground level, that has to be looked upon. But as an investor, people have welcomed this budget, looking at that the growth and the expansion phase the government is looking forward to plan across in the future. Yes, a little bit on the pessimist side for the retail investors, that there were no tax cuts for retail investors. So that was, I would say, a little bit shocking, and we were expecting some good news coming that retail investors could save some amount of their taxes on.
All right. In fact, the Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, is speaking at this point in time. She's addressing a press conference. We are quickly going to dip into that.
So, thank you for coming here today. Is this what? Thank you very much for coming here today. Slightly longish opening remarks. I'll try to cut it down. But over and above what you heard me say, I just want to give the overall perspective, so I'll take a bit longer than I desire. See, this is an interim budget presented just before the election, obviously. The four large things that I want to draw your attention to is GDP You get the numbers, you see it, and so on. But I want to bring in this dimension, that governance, development, and performance. On all these three heads, I'd like to say what actually we have achieved, because that forms the backdrop. So, on governance, this budget speaks from a position where we have delivered on development, we better managed the economy with correct intentions, correct policies, and correct decisions. So it's a governance with care, conviction, and confidence. If that stood for the GDP's G, the D stands for people living better, earning better, and having high aspirations for the future. And if I move to the P, the performance, 3 consecutive years of 7% growth. Fastest growing economy in G20, all parts of the country participating in the growth. Price stability and inflation management. Handling the health and economic fallout of COVID. Build out of physical, digital, and social infrastructure. DPI as a factor of production almost for formalization and financial inclusion and growth of the economy. Cleaning up the banking system, GST, one nation, one market, and one tax, the IBC. So if you were to look at governments, I've listed some of them. So your GDP, as we look at governance, development, and performance, I have something to say on each of these. So this budget, vote on account, is getting presented with the GDP that we want to speak to you about, and in that the fiscal management actually is something which I would like you to spend some time even as you go through the budget, but I'll flag it here. Bringing down the fiscal deficit in spite of very challenging times, as per the announced consolidation path, and with transparency and prudence. So in fact, I was just remarking to my officers this morning, most of you all had already calculated the figures, RE revenue, RE expenditure, this is what it is, because every month you get the reports coming out. So you don't need to wait till the budget statement. Every month you get the accounts, and so budget process has become absolutely transparent and questionable. If there are any, you're there to question, we are here to answer. But we set in the process of keeping everything brought on budget and nothing kept aside from it or underneath it. So with that, the budget deficit, fiscal deficit, 5.8%, which is much lower than the 5.9 which was at the BE. Similarly, for the 24-25 budget, we've given 5.1 as the fiscal deficit, so clearly indicating that we are on track to meet the glide path which was set in 2021-22, and that we are well on track to meet the 4.5% fiscal deficit, on or below 4.5 even by FY26. If this is the background with which I'm talking and the presentation of the budget happened, I want to very clearly put some things under the heading, if you want to call it that, Disha Nirdeshak Baatein. You must have heard the Honorable Prime Minister speak before the Parliament session, well before the sessions commenced. His usual customary remarks. He said the budget will be presented tomorrow and you will have some Disha Nirdeshak Baatein in it. So, what are those Disha Nirdeshak Baatein? There are about 5 of them I highlight. Social justice as effective and necessary governance model.
All right, effective governance model. The finance minister also spoke about, another abbreviation for the GDP, which is growth, development and performance. Dr. Moksha Kalyanram, advocate at La Mintaj Legal, also with us on the program. Dr. Moksha, I hope you can hear me now, sir. Dr. Moksha? All right, please unmute yourself, sir. We are not able to hear you. Okay, so there seems to be a problem with the audio, so why don't you log off and log in again? In the meantime, we'll try and figure this out. Dr. Anil Banchor, MD of RDC, with us on the program as well. Mr. Anil Banchor, if you can hear me?
Yes.
All right. Your assessment and judgment of the budget, was it lukewarm? Was it circumspect? Was it in line? What is expected from an interim budget? Were there any groundbreaking breakthrough announcements, according to you, that were made by, the finance minister today? What do you make of, what the finance minister said? It was a shorter speech. She spoke about Viksit Bharat. She spoke about GDP. She spoke about Gyan. And she spoke about, what the Prime Minister has achieved and what 2024 Lok Sabha elections is also going to bring. And she was very confident that Modi 3.0 is definitely going to happen.
Right. Thank you very much. At the outset, we extend our appreciation to the government for this budget. This is not a big bang budget, but no populist measure in this. But budget is very forward looking. And also there is a continued focus on the infrastructure and development, right? And at the same time, the fiscal deficit, they are trying to control it, right? 11% hike in capex is a welcome sign. A lot of infrastructure projects will be there, particularly in the roads, metro, affordable housing, low-cost housing, okay? And this will boost the demand for cement and concrete and also generate a lot of employment, right? Another point is about the dedicated rail freight corridors, right? Particularly for energy, minerals, cement, and connectivity to the port is a welcome sign, and this will improve the efficiency and also reduce the cost. On the EV front, also the government is very, very bullish. They are going to encourage the manufacturing facilities and also the charging stations. Already a lot of e-scooters and e-cars are already there in place, and e-buses for mobility is a good sign. In our industry, in the construction industry, we are started using the EV loaders, and we are trying to go for EV trucks. And this government initiative will help us in encouraging to have more EV trucks in our business. So overall, is a very good budget, right? And the solar energy on the rooftop solar energy is also a welcome sign, right? This will be like a green energy. And all these initiatives of the government is very sustainable and the growth oriented. I can give around 5 out of 5 marks to the government on this budget.
Okay, let me also get in a comment quickly from Jayant Krishna, Senior Fellow at the CSIS. Mr. Jayant Krishna, are you there with us?
Yeah, I'm very much there.
Right. Well, the finance minister more than often alluded to the fact that before 2013-14, the economy was in a mess. We have fixed it. We have brought it down to such a level where the hygiene for growth is absolutely intact. And the people of the country, more than 40 crore of them have benefited because of the yojnas that this government has articulated over the last decade. What was your assessment of what was said today? Was it becoming of a budget right before the elections, like I mentioned earlier on as well? If you're the government, if I was the government, I would definitely not tweak a winning formula.
Yeah, so, fundamentally, any government in power would have multiple schemes and there'll be beneficiaries of that, and those beneficiaries can be counted. I think the credit that this government does deserve is that, in a lot of these government schemes, they have done direct benefit transfer. They had opened Jan Dhan accounts and so on and so forth. So the financial leakages which used to happen in cascading the money down, those have reduced. I think that credit must be given to this government, and they rode successfully on the technology backbone developed by the earlier government in the form of an Aadhaar and so on and so forth. So I think it reflects. It's definitely to their credit that they have delivered on that front. Otherwise, I think it being an election year, and most of the another good thing is that the government has refrained from making it a populist budget. Otherwise, if you look at the history of all interim budgets or votes on account just before the Lok Sabha elections, most of them have had populist measures, including the budget presented by Mr. Piyush Goyal, the interim the stopgap finance minister in the year 2019. It was far more detailed, and it had a lot of populist measures. So I think the credit goes to the government that they have refrained from doing that. I mean, one simple thing was that people expected that income tax slabs would be rationalized, the standard deduction would be increased. Many other things like LTA would become eligible for exemption every year rather than twice in a band of 4 years. All those kind of things. So I think they've refrained, which is a good going, and it is actually interim. Perhaps the shortest ever budget speech, no major policy imperative. A couple of things which I think do deserve special mention are the allocation of 1 lakh crore they've done for research and development for science and technology, and where they've said that they'll do long-term financing of these R&D projects in the private sector, in the industry, and they'll be low cost or nil interest kind of loans, which is good, because our R&D spend as a country is just about 0.7% of the GDP, which is the lowest among all major economies in the world. And
right. So hold on to that thought, sir. Mr. Amitabh Kant, the G20 Sherpa, is also joining us at this point in time to give his reaction to the budget that was read out in the Parliament today. Mr. Kant, appreciate you joining us, sir. I hope you can hear me. Right. Mr. Kant, do you think that this was, the right budget at the right time?
Well, I would say it was a very disciplined budget. It was a budget of a confident government which is getting into election. And it was a budget which was fiscally very prudent.
Well, there were a lot of misses. There were a few omissions. Perhaps, a number of people were expecting that the tax slabs would be touched. MSMEs, for that matter, were looking for, some respite. Do you think that is perhaps being put on a hold? Because, it is election year after all, and the government is obviously going to give attention to all these demands and all these asks, but again, at the right time.
Look here, this is an interim budget. You have to appreciate the government for its discipline, for the fact that it has brought down the fiscal deficit from 5.8 to 5.1%, laid a roadmap to further bring it down to 4.5%. That really shows that the government believes in macroeconomic fundamentals of the economy. It is looking at long-term growth of 2047. It is not looking at piecemeal benefits to individual sections of the society. It is looking at driving sustained green growth over a long period of time, which is critical for India. And that is why giving these goodies to different sectors of the economy is no good for the economy. And I would really like to place on record my great appreciation for being fiscally responsible and for being very, very disciplined.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.